Hello everybody and welcome to week 2. I'm Rob, this is Mary. We haven't changed. And yes.
No, so, I'm Rob and he's Mary.
Yes, yeah. That's where we were sitting last time. But yes, I'd just like to say thank you for your continued participation, your extended participation. I think we've been delighted with the quality and the extent of posts. We've got really quite significant responses, haven't we? Yeah. Thank you very much for that, because as we said last week, that really adds to the course and adds to what the platform we've given you. So thank you very much for that. And Mary, did you want to?
I wanted to say hello to Rodrigo. I can't quite pronounce the first name. Ramirez, and somebody's saying this is Rodrigo. Is it on? Yes, Rodrigo, it is on. We're here. We're live from Southampton. Pretty grim grey day, but hey, November in Southampton is not the most exciting place to be. Anyway, let's get back to business. I think what has impressed me most, what's been so outstanding this week, is the degree to which people are able to tell their stories. We've only been going a week and a bit, and yet already we've had these little anecdotes, these little snapshots of people's lives. You're telling stories, things that have happened to you. This is remarkable, that you feel comfortable enough to let those stories be heard by anybody in the world who happens to be on this MOOC. So that gives me the most tremendous amount of pleasure, and I feel, well, we can't be doing that badly if people are trusting the environment, the platform that we've created. So thank you very much indeed. Means a lot. That's what I wanted to say to kick off with. So absolutely. Over to you, so it's like Rob.
The community behaving as a community, and again, I'd like to add also the range of experiences we have in terms of the context people are coming from, and also the roles, because we have the experience of English in higher education from different perspectives, from language teachers, support teachers, to heads of programs who are responsible for all the higher level decisions. So thank you very much, because it really gives a lot of perspective from different angles that we just guess about, I think.
Yes, we do guess largely. Oh, and a big thank you to Sandra, and please apologies for the pronunciation, Sandra Beskrovnaya Efremova in Russia, who is participating with such enthusiasm. It's wonderful. Thank you. Big thank you to you. Yeah.
So yes, so some areas I thought that have been interesting. I thought we'd go over some of the week's best bits, the highlights.
Best bits.
Yes. So I'd say an interesting area of discussion has come around language and communication on one side, and some subject knowledge and educating on the other side. And we're getting a really, if you read other people's posts, we're getting a really multi-dimensional picture of this. We're seeing this, or the number of things that come into this idea, like preparation, personality of the teacher, enthusiasm, the values people have, the expectations you have, and how you coordinate your expectations and communicate those to students. So again, what's also interesting is that obviously language and communication is part of that. So we don't want to remove, so we're kind of criticizing some dominant ideas of what a good speaker is like, but we don't want the illusion of saying that language is not important. So I think people have really, as you said, through stories and through their own experiences, they have given us a really round picture of the number of dimensions there is to this discussion, and how language is important compared to subject knowledge, and how you communicate subject knowledge effectively. And I think the other thing with the Joey Barton video people realized is, it's not always, speaking more quickly is not a way to communicate effectively. So fluency can come, and sort of the vocabulary you use, that can come at the expense of communication at times. So
yeah.
Mary, did you have anything?
Well, there are so many things I want to say. I'm really pleased at the number of comments that we've had from people. And once again, I'm going to forget somebody, but Elvis, Yelena, Nicholas, Louise, and so on. Natalia, who, because we've got a couple of Natalias on the course, Natalia, who advises taking MOOCs, following MOOCs and learning from MOOCs. Thank you so much for saying that, because it's not just that we happen to have the privilege of being able to use this platform, but we do feel that MOOCs have a great place to play in the future of particularly higher education. So it's so good that you are emphasising the benefits of learning, in this case English and language and communication, and communication in an international environment from participating in MOOCs. It's sort of reinforcing the idea. Lots of practical ideas are coming through. Rodrigo suggesting that we record ourselves in class, which is sometimes something that we're a bit scared of doing, but actually you do learn a tremendous amount from recording just your voice, even if you don't have a video. Natalia, and I'm not sure if it's the same Natalia or another Natalia, I'm getting confused with my Natalias and my Natalias, but the really big importance of a good beginning and a good ending to your lecture. You know, good ending. So many times I see people who just going to say, oh well, and that's the end. It falls so flat, even if what's preceded it has been excellent. You know, really can almost destroy what's gone before if you don't finish in a good way. Javaria, Rob, do you have any advice on the pronunciations?
Havaria.
There we go.
Say, correct me if I'm wrong.
You know, the importance of making the connection with the audience, making that bond, establishing the bond, showing your passion for the subject and so on. All ways of engaging people, because you can be the most knowledgeable person in the world, but if you can't engage your audience and communicate with them, you know, across that barrier of the the table or whatever it is, the days in front of you, then if you can't get across that barrier, then obviously some of the communication will be lost. Can I advise to everybody to check out what Juan is saying? Juan, I think you wanted to say something about Juan as well, didn't you?
I have a note with Juan written on, yes. But
Juan La Huerta has got some really interesting facts and figures about the voice in that section, about the speed of delivery, pitch, some facts and figures and volume and so on. So I would recommend you to seek out Juan's numerous posts. He's got a lot to tell us. We've got a lot to learn from you, Juan. I'm gabbling on at the moment, so I think I should hand over to Rob so that he can gabble.
I can gabble too.
You can gabble too,
okay.
Yes.
Yes, so yeah, I'd say one thing that came out also in the practical guide is how we communicate the passion we have for our subject and what really attracts us to what we're teaching, how we communicate that effectively to learners as advice for the classroom, and just even thinking from a different perspective. So some people think, how are we understood, which is very important, and then how do we inspire, how do we encourage people to find the same usefulness and the same attractiveness in the content as we see, you know. And often experience makes you less wise because you don't remember what it was like as a student to learn it for the first time. So that was very interesting, and Juan was talking about sort of communication and how you communicate, how you inspire. Martin's is also, he talked about the communicative focus in the classroom, and Natalia talked about, you know, going beyond, getting experience beyond your local setting, because only knowing your context, you know, it's you have to know your local context, but also you need to know what happens beyond it to get a really strong idea of what's happening. You know, when you teach through English and the different higher education settings around the world, which is again what's very important about having a MOOC, where we can bring a community together and see our differences, see our similarities, and find out what's happening. And learning from videos, by the way, I was going to say.
That was an excellent.
Oh yes, that was brilliant.
Wasn't
yes,
it?
It was a wonderful conversation about that.
Oh yeah.
And I learnt myself from watching the videos that I have to keep my eyebrows still. because they can be very distracting when I get excited. So
Yeah.
apologies if they're...
Rob's excited eyebrows.
Yes.
I think what's really nice about this section, which I think is 2.5, that you are suggesting videos which obviously have content, and perhaps this these suggestions will help you to create a bank of videos for your own content area, which is something that we can't do in this MOOC. You know, this is just a general introduction to EMI. We can't go into the specifics of teaching each individual discipline. All we can do is talk in general terms. But through this exercise, then, you know, you might pick up on 1 or 2 TED Talks or whatever it is that you didn't know about, so they can go into your bank. So I hope we're beginning in our different fields, beginning to, you know, make our own little mini lists of references, things that we can use, maybe not now, but in the future with our students. So please, more of it. It's helping people all over.
And I was going to mention we had some questions as well.
We
that were
had
posted.
some questions, we did.
So the first one was about code switching. So using different languages in the classroom. How do you preserve the benefits of being multilingual, of being able to code switch when you have, say, some people in the class who can't speak the other language? So, for example, you might have a majority Thai class with some people from other countries.
Yes.
So code switching will have a benefit for the Thai students, but not for the other students. So do you have a response to that? Or?
I always respond in the same way. I mean, we're talking generally, but the first thing is to talk about it and to establish rules for the classroom, because it does depend on numbers very often, you know, which nationality group, language group are dominant, and to talk about it and to sort of ask questions like, how would you feel if you were in the minority group, and perhaps talking about a kind of etiquette for the classroom. You might decide that it's English only in the classroom. Fair enough. You may decide that we can dip into other languages, but acknowledge the fact. And perhaps if we're sitting next to somebody, I'll use you as an example, Rob. Perhaps there's somebody sitting next to Rob that speaks the same language as me. You know, just not ignoring Rob and speaking over him, but actually saying, excuse me a moment, I'm going to speak in whatever it is, Thai, English, whatever, to that person. So just imagining what it's like for the other person. It's empathy that we're talking about, bringing it out into the open, and perhaps discussing how it might be to be from a different culture, and how what we do can have different effects. So that would be my starting point anyway. I don't know if you would do something different.
We're moving towards week 4 now, be careful.
Oh, yes, of course.
Intercultural communication,
yes.
I think, yes. But yes, I think the... I would agree and say, I generally go with the policy of avoiding harm to the minority over trying to create the best educational environment for everybody. So I decide what's my minimum standard, but I've observed classrooms when I did my PhD research. I observed a lot of lectures where this was happening, and you could see lots of students were, you know, they were demotivated, and they thought, oh, here we go. They're going to talk about this nationality's cultural knowledge in their own language, and we have to sit back and it's very hard to get those students involved again, because if you've lost them, it's harder, isn't it, to bring them back especially
in.
These days when you have laptops in front of you and you can go off into some game somewhere, then it's harder to get people
I've
back.
got a laptop in front of me. Let me have a look. I can't read what it says actually at the moment. Ignore me. Okay. You carry on, Rob. I can't read what it says.
So we had another question while Mary's checking.
Oh, what have I done?
Going to sleep. So Mahmoud asked about how to create a collaborative environment where native speakers and non-native speakers, the lecturers, share their experiences and their skills. And again, I think that's it's quite a simple answer. I think it has to be done on a basis of professionalism, respect, and really without othering as well, because you don't want an identity that a native speaking lecturer has that's different from a non-native speaking lecturer, because that's you grouping people doesn't tend to help. But I think again, the MOOC is an example, bringing people together, having a systematic approach to continuing professional development, recognizing the talents you have and bringing people together using their knowledge, respecting local knowledge, respecting multilingualism, respecting the skills everybody has, and finding a way of channeling it together in a shared way, again, like we're trying to do with this course. I think that's the best way to get involved, to get everybody involved in a shared mission. But it's a good question, and sometimes we do have this segregation or this sort of boundary between different people who have different statuses that was mentioned on the Facebook group as well.
Yes.
Yeah, so
absolutely.
There are lots of issues.
Can we remind you about the Facebook group? And also we should remind you of this hashtag FLEMI, which I don't know if you're Twitter users, part of the Twitterati, but please do use it. Yes. We'd be delighted to hear from you. So many interesting things to comment on. One of the things that I enjoyed reading was the section what to do if students speak better English than you do, and there was a lot of very sensible advice given there, and it tended to be that we think of ourselves more in the role of the facilitator rather than the deliverer of knowledge, and this made me think, it made me reflect on how much my identity as a teacher has changed over the years. That I thought of myself years ago, I'm not going to say how many years ago, many years ago, as being like this deliverer of knowledge, and I behaved in a certain way, and I expected my students to behave in a different way, a certain way. But now when I look at myself, I'm almost the complete opposite. So I think it might be interesting, I'll leave this question with you. Those of you who do already engage with EMI in one way or another, how are you changing? What's changing for you, not just in the class, but how you feel about yourself, the labels you'd give yourself, facilitator or whatever it is. I think it's ever so interesting to pursue that, and if you'd like to tell us, then I'd be really grateful.
I've noticed we have a question.
Somebody says, I'm sorry, I don't tweet. Never mind.
Oh no, and above that we have a question. That wasn't the question. So what can we do when we see a student or some students falling behind in the course due to a poorer language performance? And poorer is in scare quotes. Yeah. So yes.
Yeah. I think this was touched on by someone. It depends what resources your university has to support the language of language proficiency of students in your class. So it may be that there are classes, there are resources in a resources centre or something, but you can obviously recommend perhaps some YouTube videos, pre-lecture readings, of course, that you can give out. The idea of people working together in groups to support one another, flipping the classroom, some people have talked about that already. So there are ways of organisational ways, let's say, that can help and support weaker people. There are resources that might be available to you, and post-lecture, how do you deal with students? Is it on an individual basis, on a group basis, people who are perhaps having difficulty with the content? There are so many different things.
Oh, there are, yeah.
So many different ways. What resources do you have? What time do you have as well?
Yeah. And I think for me, you've hit on all the right advice there. It's basically, I think there's what can you do before the class what's the word?
Tuned in. No,
trying not to be idiomatic.
No,
now.
I'm trying not to be idiomatic.
Focused.
Focused on the content of your upcoming lecture.
Yeah, and then there are things in the lecture. So remembering you can be visual. You can use speech, you can use writing, you can use handouts, you can use different things to facilitate your learning and make sure it's structured in a way where it's easier for people with lower language ability to understand. And then, as you said, post-lecture, summaries. If people can't understand your lecture, summaries of what you've said, how it's going to be applied, activities they can do afterwards. But the longer term, I think you have to look for institutional support. If those students are in your university, they have to be supported and make a case for greater support if the support isn't there, because it's a difficult struggle sometimes.
Yeah. So often, though, it's left to us, isn't it? There isn't always the institutional support.
No.
Another thing to think about is a really basic thing, but who works with who in the classroom? If you're going to have some sort of interaction, are you going to pair stronger students with weaker students? Are you going to put all the strong ones together, all the weaker ones together in your classroom for group activities? How are you going to mix nationalities and language proficiency? You know, you have to experiment to a certain extent in your situation, and just think, you know, how can I change things around a bit to perhaps benefit people who might be struggling for one reason or another.
And speaking of benefiting people who might be struggling, somebody has to write the subtitles for this, so I think we should finish now before they have to subtitle anymore.
Yes.
So I say thank you very much for joining us in the chat. Thank you very much for joining us on the course, and we hope to see you in week 3.
In week 3. Bye bye for now.
Yeah, bye bye.
Have a good week. Bye bye.